The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the corridors of Harmony Prime Station. One by one, the representatives of 47 different species made their way through the security checkpoints, each delegation heavily armed according to their ancient customs and biological needs. The Zephyrian delegates walked tall and proud, their blue-scaled skin gleaming under the artificial lights. Each carried a plasma rifle strapped to their backs, the weapons humming with barely contained energy. Their leader, Commander Vex, nodded respectfully to the security guards as he placed his secondary weapon on the scanning table. The guards ran their instruments over the rifle, checking for any modifications that might violate council regulations. Behind them came the Vorthan delegation, their crystalline bodies refracting the light into rainbow patterns across the walls. They carried sonic disruptors that looked like twisted glass sculptures but could shatter bone from 50 meters away. The lead Vorthan, speaking in harmonic tones that translated through the universal communicators, declared his weapons to the guards as required by protocol. The insectoid klaxon arrived next, their chitinous forms encased in traditional combat exoskeletons that served both ceremonial and practical purposes. Young Representative Zix, 9 struggled slightly with the weight of his heritage armor, the metal plates clanking as he moved. His compound eyes tracked the movements of every other species in the area, a defensive instinct bred into his people over millions of years of evolution. The Brute-Hari delegation stomped through the checkpoint with characteristic directness. These massive, bear-like beings carried weapons that looked more like clubs than sophisticated firearms, but appearances were deceiving. Each weapon contained enough explosive power to level a city block. Their leader, General Korg, grunted his approval as the guards verified his arsenal. Weapon after weapon was scanned, catalogued, and temporarily secured in the holding chambers adjacent to the main council room. Pulse rifles, energy swords, biotoxin dispensers, gravity hammers, neural disruptors, and devices whose purposes defied easy translation filled the storage areas. Some weapons were so exotic that the guards had to consult their databases just to understand what they were looking at. The ethereal delegation floated past the checkpoints without physical weapons, but the energy readings from their bodies showed they carried enough psychic power to influence minds across half the station. The guards made notes on their special monitoring equipment, tracking the mental signatures that could be just as dangerous as any blade or gun. As the final delegations passed through security, a murmur began to spread through the gathered representatives. The humans were arriving, and something was different about them. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked calmly toward the security checkpoint, his aide Lisa Carter beside him. Both wore simple diplomatic uniforms without any visible armor or protective devices. They carried briefcases that contained nothing more threatening than data tablets and legal documents. As they approached the weapon scanners, the guards looked confused. "Sir," one of the guards said carefully, "you need to declare your weapons before entering the chamber." Jake smiled and spread his arms wide. "We don't carry any weapons." The guard blinked in surprise. This was unprecedented. Every species brought weapons to the council meetings. It was not just tradition but considered a basic requirement for survival in a galaxy full of potential threats. The guard looked at his scanner readings, then back at the humans. The scanners show no energy signatures, no metal weapons, no biological toxins, no psychic enhancement devices, the guard reported to his supervisor through his communicator. They appear to be completely unarmed. Other species in the area began to take notice. The Klaxon delegate Zix, 9 chittered in amazement, his translator struggling to convey his incredulous tone. How do they expect to defend themselves if negotiations turn hostile? How do they plan to enforce their positions without the backing of force? Omander Vex of the Zephyrians overheard the comment and turned his large reptilian head toward the young Klaxon. "You must be new to the council, youngling. The humans have a special exemption. They are the only species allowed to enter the chamber completely unarmed." "But why?" Zix, 9 asked, his compound eyes focusing on the humans as they calmly walked through the scanners without setting off a single alarm. What makes them so different? What makes them so special that they can break the most basic rule of galactic diplomacy? The Vorthan delegate pulsed with curious light patterns, which translated as agreement with the question. Even the massive Brute-Hari seemed interested in the answer, their usual gruff demeanor replaced with something approaching respect as they watched the humans pass. The rule was made specifically for them, Vex explained, his voice carrying the weight of years spent in these halls. 50 years ago, when the first human addressed this council, something happened that changed how we all think about weapons and power. Lisa Carter noticed the attention they were receiving and whispered to Jake, "They're all staring at us again." Jake nodded slightly, maintaining his diplomatic composure. "They always do. Most of the newer species still don't understand why we're given this privilege. Some of the older ones remember but prefer not to talk about it." As they entered the main chamber, the conversations around them continued. Species that had been enemies for centuries sat in the same room, their weapons safely stored away but their guards never truly lowered. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the various environmental needs of dozens of different life forms. Atmospheric controls created perfect breathing conditions for each delegation, while gravity adjusters ensured that everyone could move comfortably. The great circular table at the center could seat representatives from every known sapient species in the galaxy. Each position was equipped with translation devices, environmental controls, and emergency defense systems. Every position except the human seats, which were notably simpler and lacked the protective barriers that other species required. As Jake and Lisa took their seats, the whispers continued around them. The newer council members exchanged glances and quiet comments about the strange humans who came to the most important diplomatic gathering in the galaxy carrying nothing more dangerous than briefcases full of papers. High above them, in the observer galleries, other species watched and wondered. The mystery of human exceptionalism in the council chambers had become something of a legend among the younger generations of galactic citizens. They knew the rule existed, but few understood why. The session was about to begin, and once again, the humans sat calmly among warriors, predators, and beings capable of destroying entire worlds. They sat without weapons, without armor, without any of the protections that every other sapient species considered absolutely necessary for survival. And somehow, they were the ones everyone else feared the most. 50 years earlier, the Galactic Council had been a very different place. The Great Chamber on Harmony Prime was newer then, its walls still bearing the scars from the construction wars that had raged during its building. Species that now sat together in relative peace had been at each other's throats, and the council sessions often erupted into violence despite all the security measures. Captain Sam Rodriguez of the human exploration vessel New Frontier stood outside the chamber doors, looking up at the imposing entrance with a mixture of awe and nervousness. Humanity had just made contact with galactic civilization 6 months earlier, and this was their first official invitation to address the council. Sam knew that everything he said and did in the next few hours could determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "Last chance to reconsider, Captain," said his security chief, Lieutenant Dan Brooks, who stood beside him in full combat gear. "We still don't know enough about these aliens to trust them completely. Let me come in with you as protection." Sam shook his head. The invitation was clear. Only the designated speaker is allowed to address the council, and no weapons are permitted in the chamber. We need to show them that humans can follow their rules. The security checkpoint ahead was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species argued with guards about weapon classifications and cultural exemptions. The Zephyrian delegation was demanding that their ceremonial honor blades be classified as religious items rather than weapons. The Vorthan were insisting that their sonic devices were medical equipment, not weapons, despite their obvious destructive capabilities. When Sam approached the checkpoint, the guards looked at him with the same bureaucratic indifference they showed everyone else. "Species and Weapons Declaration," the lead guard said in heavily accented Universal Standard. "Human." "Captain Sam Rodriguez of the Earth vessel New Frontier," Sam replied. He paused for a moment, then added, "No weapons to declare." The guard's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "No weapons? This is impossible. All species carry weapons. It is basic survival instinct." "Humans don't always carry weapons," Sam explained patiently. "We prefer to solve problems through discussion when possible." The guard consulted his scanner, running it over Sam's body several times. The device remained silent. No energy signatures, no metal objects, no biological toxins, no psychic enhancement devices. The guard looked confused and called his supervisor. The scans show nothing, the supervisor confirmed after running his own tests. This human appears to be completely defenseless. He looked at Sam with something approaching pity. Are you certain you want to enter the chamber without any means of protection? Some of the species in there consider unarmed beings to be either prey or cowards. Sam straightened his shoulders. I'm certain. Word of the weaponless human spread quickly through the waiting area. Representatives from various species gathered to stare at this strange being who walked toward certain doom with nothing but confidence to protect him. Some laughed, others whispered about human stupidity, and a few seemed genuinely concerned for his safety. The chamber doors opened, and Sam walked in alone. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. A territorial dispute between the Crimson Horde and the Blue Star Federation had been dragging on for months, with neither side willing to compromise. Both factions sat across from each other with hands near their weapons, despite the Council's strict rules about maintaining peace during sessions. Elder Counselor Thek of the Broodhari called the session to order with a bang of his massive stone gavel. We recognize the new species called humans. Captain Sam Rodriguez, you may address the council. Sam walked to the center of the chamber, and for a moment, silence fell over the room. Here was a being from a species nobody had heard of until recently, standing completely defenseless among some of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Honored delegates, Sam began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I come before you not as a warrior or a conqueror, but as someone who hopes to understand. The Crimson Horde representative, General Varix, snorted in derision. Understand? What could a weak species like yours possibly understand about the realities of galactic politics? Instead of taking offense, Sam turned to face Varix directly. I understand that your people have been fighting over the Kepler-7 system for 8 months. I understand that both sides have lost thousands of soldiers and spent billions of credits on a war that seems to have no end. The Blue Star Federation delegate, Admiral Chen, leaned forward. And what would you suggest, human? That we simply give up our rightful claim to those worlds? Sam looked between the two factions, then addressed the entire chamber. I spent 3 weeks studying the files on this conflict. Do you know what I found? Neither side actually wants the planets in Kepler-7. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Both Varix and Chen started to object, but Sam continued speaking. General Varix, your people are nomads. You don't colonize planets. You live on ships and space stations. The only reason you're fighting for Kepler-7 is because it was marked as Crimson Horde territory in a treaty signed 200 years ago. You're fighting for it because your honor demands it, not because you need it. Varix's massive form tensed, but he didn't interrupt. Admiral Chen, your federation already has more habitable worlds than you can properly develop. You don't need Kepler-7 either. You're fighting for it because giving up would be seen as weakness by your political opponents back home. Sam walked to the center of the chamber, positioning himself between the two factions. Both sides are spending enormous resources fighting for something neither of you actually wants, because you're afraid of looking weak if you back down. But what if there was a way for both sides to withdraw with honor intact? For the next hour, Sam laid out a proposal that nobody had considered. The Kepler-7 system would become a neutral zone, administered jointly by both factions as a refugee resettlement area for species displaced by various conflicts. Both sides would be seen as heroes for their humanitarian gesture, and the resources they had been spending on war could be redirected to helping those in need. The chamber fell silent as delegates from both factions considered the proposal. It was elegant in its simplicity, addressing the real concerns behind the conflict rather than just the surface issues. Elder Counselor Thek watched in amazement as centuries-old enemies began to nod in agreement. Within 2 hours, both sides had agreed to Sam's plan. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Thek approached Sam. Captain Rodriguez, I have seen many warriors enter this chamber. I have seen beings who could destroy worlds with their weapons. But I have never seen anyone accomplish what you just did. Sam smiled modestly. I just listened to what people were really saying instead of what they claimed to want. Thek's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You carry no weapons, yet you just prevented a war that could have lasted decades. Perhaps humans possess something more dangerous than any physical armament. That night, the council voted unanimously to create a special exemption in their rules. From that day forward, humans would be the only species allowed to enter the council chamber without weapons. The official reason given was that humans had demonstrated a unique approach to conflict resolution that did not rely on force or the threat of force. The real reason, which Elder Counselor Thek recorded in his private journal, was simpler and more disturbing: the humans have weaponized empathy itself. They can see through our motivations, understand our fears, and turn our own desires against us. They are more dangerous unarmed than any of us are with our most powerful weapons. Dr. Amy Foster sat in her laboratory aboard the research station New Horizons, surrounded by holographic displays showing brain scans from dozens of different species. Across from her, her colleague Dr. Zethan of the Vorthan Collective pulsed with curious blue light patterns as he studied the data. "I still do not understand," Zethan's harmonic voice translated through the communication device. "How do humans accomplish what they do without any physical advantages? Your species is not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most intelligent by standard measures. Yet you consistently achieve results that elude far more advanced civilizations." Amy smiled and gestured to the brain scans floating between them. "The answer is right here in these images. Look at the neural pathways in a human brain compared to other species." The holographic display highlighted specific regions in bright yellow. Amy pointed to the largest concentration of activity. "This is the human empathy center. It's enormous compared to most other species. But here's what makes it really special." She manipulated the display to show neural connections flowing between different brain regions. In most species, empathy is a separate function. You feel what others feel, but it doesn't necessarily connect to your decision-making processes. In humans, empathy is wired directly into our problem-solving centers. Zethan's crystalline form flickered with interest. "You are saying that humans cannot solve problems without considering the emotional states of others?" "More than that," Amy said, bringing up a new set of scans. "These are from humans engaged in negotiation. Watch what happens." The brain activity on the display lit up like a Christmas tree. Multiple regions activated simultaneously, creating a complex web of neural activity. When a human enters a negotiation, their brain automatically starts mapping the emotional landscape of everyone involved. They're reading microexpressions, voice tones, body language, even subconscious behavioral patterns. She switched to a scan from a Zephyrian brain during negotiation. The activity was much more focused, concentrated in logic and memory centers. Compare this to a Zephyrian approach. They focus on facts, precedent, and logical arguments. Very effective for straightforward disputes, but they miss the underlying emotional drivers. "But surely this empathic ability would be a weakness," Zethan argued. "If humans feel the pain of their opponents, would they not be less likely to push for advantage?" Amy laughed. "That's what most species assume, but it's exactly backwards. Watch this." She pulled up a recording from a recent negotiation between human mediator Ben Harper and representatives from the Nexuri and Lumen species. The two alien species had been deadlocked for months over mining rights in a disputed system. On the screen, Ben sat calmly between the two delegates. The Nexuri representative, Engineer Clicks, was clearly frustrated, his metallic fingers tapping impatiently on the table. The Lumen delegate, Harmony Singer Yull, sat perfectly still, but her usually bright aura had dimmed to a dull gray. "Engineer Clicks," Ben said in the recording, "I can see that you're frustrated because your people need those rare minerals to repair your aging infrastructure. Your home worlds are literally falling apart, and this mining operation represents hope for your children's future." Clicks's tapping stopped abruptly. His optical sensors focused intently on Ben. "How did you know about our infrastructure problems?" "That information was classified." Ben smiled gently. "You didn't tell me directly, but your body language has been telling me all morning. The way you keep checking your chronometer suggests you're under time pressure. The slight corrosion marks on your external components indicate resource shortages. And the fact that you've been willing to argue over a marginal mining site for months tells me your people are getting desperate." Amy paused the recording. "Do you see what he's doing? He's not just reading Clicks's emotions. He's using his empathic understanding to identify the real problem behind the stated position. The recording continued. Ben turned to the Lumen delegate. And Harmony Singer, yo, your people don't actually care about the minerals at all. What you're really fighting for is the sacred grove on the third planet. Your entire species' spiritual practice is connected to the trees that grow there. Yull's aura brightened slightly. You understand the true heart of our concern. Here's what I propose, Ben said. The Nexari take the mining rights to the first 2 planets in the system, which have plenty of the minerals you need. The Lumen keep the third planet as a protected spiritual site. But here's the key part, the Nexari share 20% of their mining profits with the Lumen to fund conservation efforts on other worlds. Amy paused the recording again. Both sides got what they actually needed, not what they thought they wanted. But the real genius is in how Ben structured the deal. He made it so that each side's success depends on the other's well-being. The Nexari need the Lumen to protect their mining operations from raiders, and the Lumen need the Nexari's profits to fund their conservation work. Zethan's light patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating profound thought. The human did not simply solve the immediate problem. He restructured the entire relationship to prevent future conflicts. Exactly. And he could only do that because his brain automatically mapped all the emotional and psychological factors involved. Most species focus on the surface issue, who gets the mining rights. Humans instinctively dig deeper to find the root causes and real needs. Amy brought up another set of brain scans. But there's more. These are from humans engaged in what we call strategic empathy. Watch the neural activity. The display showed a human brain with unusual patterns of activity. Certain regions were actively suppressed while others were enhanced. Humans can actually control their empathic responses. They can feel what others are feeling, understand their motivations completely, and then choose whether or not to act on that empathy. Zethan's form went completely still, a sign of shock in his species. You are saying humans can understand others perfectly and then ignore that understanding if it serves their purposes? When necessary, yes. It's not that humans are naturally cruel. But they evolved as both predators and prey, which meant they had to understand their enemies as well as their allies. A human can feel genuine sympathy for an opponent while simultaneously outmaneuvering them. She pulled up a famous recording from the Council archives. It showed human negotiator Kate Sullivan sitting across from the notorious pirate leader Scartalone of the Razor Fleet. Scartalone was known for his brutality and complete lack of mercy. In this negotiation, Kate convinced Scartalone to not only release his hostages but to join the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. She did it by understanding that beneath his savage exterior, he was driven by a desperate need to prove his worth to a father who had abandoned him decades earlier. On the screen, Kate spoke quietly to the fearsome pirate leader. Your father told you that you would never amount to anything, didn't he? That's why you became the most feared raider in this sector. You're trying to prove him wrong. Scartalone's massive claws clenched, but he didn't attack. Instead, his voice cracked slightly as he responded. How could you possibly know that? Because I see it in everything you do, Kate said. The way you treat your crew tells me you never want anyone to feel abandoned like you did. The precision of your raids shows you're trying to prove your competence. Even your reputation for brutality is carefully calculated to inspire fear without unnecessary killing. You're not a monster, Scartalone. You're someone who's been hurt trying to prove he's worthy of love. Amy stopped the recording. Kate understood Scartalone completely. She felt genuine compassion for his pain. But she also used that understanding to manipulate him into making the choice she wanted. Most species see this as either impossible or morally wrong. Humans see it as necessary for survival. Zethan's light patterns cycled through several colors as he processed this information. This is why other species fear humans in the council chambers. Not because they might be violent, but because they can see through any deception and turn anyone's deepest motivations against them. It's not about turning motivations against people, Amy corrected. It's about finding solutions that address everyone's real needs instead of their stated positions. But yes, that level of psychological insight can be intimidating to species that are used to hiding their true intentions behind formal diplomatic language. She gestured to the brain scans one more time. Humans evolved in small social groups where survival depended on understanding complex interpersonal dynamics. They had to read the emotions and motivations of both allies and enemies to navigate tribal politics. Over millions of years, this created a species with unprecedented empathic abilities combined with the strategic thinking necessary to use those abilities effectively. Zethan's form pulsed with a pattern that indicated reluctant understanding. So when humans enter the council chamber without weapons, they are not defenseless at all. They are carrying the most sophisticated psychological warfare system in the known galaxy. Amy nodded. They're carrying something more powerful than any gun or bomb. They're carrying the ability to understand exactly what everyone else wants, why they want it, and how to give it to them in a way that serves human interests too. That's why the council exemption exists. Physical weapons are crude compared to what the human mind can do. The emergency alarm echoed through the council chambers as delegates scrambled to their feet. Red warning lights bathed the room in an ominous glow, and the massive viewscreen displayed images that made even the bravest warriors step back in fear. The Crimson Fleet had returned. Admiral Rex of the Zephyrian Defense Force stood at the tactical display, his scaled hands moving rapidly over the controls. 300 ships, all heavily armed. They've already destroyed the outer defense stations and are demanding the surrender of all council colonies in the Epsilon sector. General Korg of the Brutehari slammed his massive fist on the table, making several smaller delegates jump. This is what comes of peace talks and diplomacy. We should have destroyed these raiders years ago when we had the chance. The Crimson Fleet has grown stronger since their last attack, Commander Vex added, his reptilian features grim. Our intelligence suggests they've acquired new weapon technologies from unknown sources. A direct military response could cost us millions of lives. Around the chamber, representatives reached instinctively for weapons that weren't there, their hands finding empty holsters and weapon belts. The stress of the situation made everyone revert to their most basic survival instincts. Human Counselor Kate Sullivan remained seated, studying the tactical display with calm concentration. Her aide, Lieutenant David Knox, leaned close to whisper urgently in her ear. Kate, the fleet reports are saying this is the largest Crimson force ever assembled. Every military advisor is recommending immediate mobilization of all council forces. They want to hit them before they can establish a beachhead in our space. Kate nodded slowly, but her expression remained thoughtful rather than panicked. David, pull up everything we have on the Crimson Fleet's recent activities. I want to know where they've been, what they've been doing, and who they've been talking to. While other delegates argued about battle strategies and weapon deployments, Kate focused on her data tablet. Information flowed across the screen, shipping records, communication intercepts, refugee reports, and intelligence briefings from across the galaxy. Admiral Rex turned to address the chamber. All available fleets are being mobilized. We estimate that a coordinated strike force could engage the Crimson Fleet within 18 hours. The cost will be enormous, but we cannot allow these pirates to threaten Council space with impunity. Wait, Kate said, standing up from her seat. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the human representative. General Korg's eyes narrowed. Human, this is not the time for your species' peculiar diplomatic methods. These are raiders and killers. They understand only force. Kate walked to the center of the chamber, her movement calm and deliberate despite the chaos around her. General, with respect, I think there's something we're missing here. David, put the Crimson Fleet movement patterns on the main screen. The tactical display shifted to show a galactic map with red lines tracking the fleet's recent positions. Kate pointed to specific locations as she spoke. Look at their path over the last 6 months. They haven't been raiding randomly. Every attack has been against mining operations, industrial facilities, or resource extraction sites. They're not taking slaves or destroying colonies for sport like they used to. Commander Vex studied the display with growing interest. You are suggesting their attacks have a pattern? More than a pattern. A specific purpose. Kate manipulated the display to highlight certain systems. These are all resource-rich systems that have been heavily industrialized in the last decade. And look at this. She overlaid environmental data on the map. Several systems showed clear signs of ecological damage, poisoned atmospheres, dead oceans, and barren worlds where life once flourished. The Crimson Fleet isn't just raiding randomly. They're targeting the sources of the pollution that's been spreading through this sector. Their home system, Varlex Prime, is right in the path of the worst contamination. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. Lieutenant Knox pulled up additional data on his tablet and shared it with the main display. The emergency alarm echoed through the council chambers as delegates scrambled to their feet. Red warning lights bathed the room in an ominous glow, and the massive view screen displayed images that made even the bravest warriors step back in fear. The Crimson Fleet had returned. Admiral Rex of the Zephyrian Defense Force stood at the tactical display, his scaled hands moving rapidly over the controls. 300 ships, all heavily armed. They've already destroyed the outer defense stations and are demanding the surrender of all council colonies in the Epsilon sector. General Korg of the Brutehari slammed his massive fist on the table, making several smaller delegates jump. This is what comes of peace talks and diplomacy. We should have destroyed these raiders years ago when we had the chance. The Crimson Fleet has grown stronger since their last attack, Commander Vex added, his reptilian features grim. Our intelligence suggests they've acquired new weapon technologies from unknown sources. A direct military response could cost us millions of lives. Around the chamber, representatives reached instinctively for weapons that weren't there, their hands finding empty holsters and weapon belts. The stress of the situation made everyone revert to their most basic survival instincts. Human Counselor Kate Sullivan remained seated, studying the tactical display with calm concentration. Her aide, Lieutenant David Knox, leaned close to whisper urgently in her ear. Kate, the fleet reports are saying this is the largest Crimson force ever assembled. Every military advisor is recommending immediate mobilization of all Council forces. They want to hit them before they can establish a beachhead in our space. Kate nodded slowly, but her expression remained thoughtful rather than panicked. David, pull up everything we have on the Crimson Fleet's recent activities. I want to know where they've been, what they've been doing, and who they've been talking to. While other delegates argued about battle strategies and weapon deployments, Kate focused on her data tablet. Information flowed across the screen, shipping records, communication intercepts, refugee reports, and intelligence briefings from across the galaxy. Admiral Rex turned to address the chamber. All available fleets are being mobilized. We estimate that a coordinated strike force could engage the Crimson Fleet within 18 hours. The cost will be enormous, but we cannot allow these pirates to threaten Council space with impunity. Wait, Kate said, standing up from her seat. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the human representative. General Korg's eyes narrowed. Human, this is not the time for your species' peculiar diplomatic methods. These are raiders and killers. They understand only force. Kate walked to the center of the chamber, her movement calm and deliberate despite the chaos around her. General, with respect, I think there's something we're missing here. David, put the Crimson Fleet movement patterns on the main screen. The tactical display shifted to show a galactic map with red lines tracking the fleet's recent positions. Kate pointed to specific locations as she spoke. Look at their path over the last 6 months. They haven't been raiding randomly. Every attack has been against mining operations, industrial facilities, or resource extraction sites. They're not taking slaves or destroying colonies for sport like they used to. Commander Vex studied the display with growing interest. You are suggesting their attacks have a pattern? More than a pattern. A specific purpose. Kate manipulated the display to highlight certain systems. These are all resource-rich systems that have been heavily industrialized in the last decade. And look at this. She overlaid environmental data on the map. Several systems showed clear signs of ecological damage, poisoned atmospheres, dead oceans, and barren worlds where life once flourished. The Crimson Fleet isn't just raiding randomly. They're targeting the sources of the pollution that's been spreading through this sector. Their home system, Varlex Prime, is right in the path of the worst contamination. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. Lieutenant Knox pulled up additional data on his tablet and shared it with the main display. The shuttle bay of the Crimson Fleet flagship Blood Fong was a cathedral of violence. Weapons of every conceivable design lined the walls like trophies, and the deck plates were stained with substances that Kate preferred not to identify. Armed raiders surrounded her transport as it settled onto the landing platform, their faces hidden behind combat masks that made them look more like demons than sentient beings. Kate Sullivan stepped out of the shuttle wearing a simple diplomatic uniform with no armor, no weapons, and no protective devices of any kind. Her only companion was a universal translator unit clipped to her collar. The raiders around her raised their weapons, clearly uncertain about what to do with an unarmed enemy who had voluntarily entered their stronghold. "I am Kate Sullivan of the human delegation," she announced clearly. "I've come to speak with Fleet Commander Varix." A massive figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the bay. Varix stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body a fusion of cybernetic enhancements and natural crimson muscle. Scars covered every visible inch of his skin, and his organic eye burned with years of accumulated rage. His cybernetic eye focused on Kate with mechanical precision. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human," Varix said, his voice amplified by vocal implants that made it sound like gravel in a blender. "No council representative has ever set foot on a crimson vessel and lived to tell about it." Kate looked up at the imposing figure without flinching. "I'm not here as a council representative. I'm here as someone who wants to understand why a mining engineer from Varlex Prime became the most feared raider in this sector." Varix's cybernetic eye flickered, and for a moment, his expression showed surprise before hardening again. "You have done your research, human. But research will not save you from the fate of all council sympathizers." "I'm not here to save myself," Kate replied calmly. "I'm here to save your people." The raiders around them shifted restlessly, unsure whether to laugh at the audacity or shoot the intruder immediately. Varix raised a hand to stop them. "Explain yourself, human. What do you think you know about my people?" Kate gestured toward a nearby wall display that showed star charts of the local sector. "May I?" Varix nodded curtly, and Kate approached the display. With practiced movements, she called up environmental data from across the region. 5 years ago, Varlex Prime was one of the most beautiful systems in this sector, Kate began, highlighting the crimson homeworld on the chart. Vast oceans, abundant wildlife, and a population of 12 billion people living in harmony with their environment. She manipulated the display to show atmospheric readings from that time period. But then the industrial expansion began. The Nexari built massive processing plants in the neighboring systems. The Lumens started strip mining operations that released heavy metals into the local space lanes. The council approved it all because the economic benefits seemed to outweigh the environmental costs. Varix's organic eye narrowed as he watched the data scroll past. "Continue." Kate overlaid current environmental readings on the display, and the difference was shocking. "This is what Varlex Prime looks like now. Atmospheric toxicity levels that are lethal to most organic life. Ocean acidification that has killed 90% of marine species. And birth defect rates that have increased by 800% in the last 3 years." She turned to face Varix directly. "Your daughter was one of the first casualties, wasn't she?" Mira Varix, age 7, died from respiratory failure caused by atmospheric contamination. For a moment, the only sound in the shuttle bay was the hum of the ship's engines. Varix's massive hands clenched into fists, and several raiders took involuntary steps backward. "How dare you speak her name?" Varix growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "How dare you use my child's memory as a weapon against me?" Kate didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped closer to the towering raider leader. "I'm not using her memory as a weapon. I'm acknowledging that she existed, that she mattered, and that her death was preventable." "Preventable?" Varix's voice rose to a roar. The council ignored every petition, every environmental report, every plea for help. They called it the price of progress while my people choked on poisoned air. "You're right," Kate said simply. "The council failed your people. We failed Mira." The admission hung in the air like an unexpected gift. Varix stared at Kate as if she had spoken in an alien language. "You admit it," he said slowly. "Of course I admit it. The evidence is overwhelming." The council prioritized economic development over environmental protection, and the result was an ecological disaster that killed millions of innocent people. Kate's voice carried genuine sadness. The question is, what do we do about it now? Varex's cybernetic eye focused on her with laser intensity. Now I make them pay for what they did. Every mining station they build, I destroy. Every transport they send, I capture. Every world they poison, I make sure they feel the cost. Kate nodded thoughtfully. And how's that working out for you? The question caught Varex off guard. What do you mean? How many mining stations have you destroyed in the last year? 50? 100? Kate called up tactical data on the display. And how many new ones have been built to replace them? 200? 300? The numbers on the screen painted a clear picture. Despite the Crimson Fleet's attacks, industrial expansion in the sector had actually accelerated. Kate continued, her voice gentle but relentless. Every attack you make gives the council justification to increase security spending, which means more military contractors getting rich, which means more political support for expanded industrial operations. You're not stopping the pollution, Varex. You're making it worse. Varex's organic eye blazed with fury. Then what would you have me do, human? Sit quietly while my people die? Submit to the same council that ignored our suffering for years? I would have you win, Kate said simply. Win? Varex laughed bitterly. Against the combined fleets of 47 species? Against weapons that could turn my entire fleet to dust? How exactly do you propose I win that war? Kate turned back to the display and called up a new set of data. You don't win by fighting them. You win by making them need you more than they need the profits from poisoning your world. The screen showed shipping routes, resource flows, and economic data from across the sector. Kate highlighted specific patterns with practiced precision. Look at these trade routes. 60% of all commerce in this sector passes through the Varlex system. The same industrial expansion that's poisoning your world has made it the single most important economic hub in this part of the galaxy. Varex studied the data with growing interest. You are suggesting we hold the economy hostage? I'm suggesting you offer them something they want more than they want to keep poisoning your world, Kate replied. The Crimson Fleet controls the most strategically important system in the sector. Instead of using that control to destroy things, use it to build something better. She manipulated the display to show a hypothetical scenario. What if the Crimson Fleet became the Varlex Cooperative? What if instead of raiding shipping, you offered protection services? What if instead of destroying industrial facilities, you built clean alternatives? Varex's cybernetic eye flickered as he processed the implications. You want me to become a legitimate government? I want you to become whatever will save your people and give Myra's death meaning, Kate said quietly. If that's a government, fine. If it's a corporation, fine. If it's something entirely new, that's fine too. The point is to use your position to create change instead of just expressing anger. For several long minutes, Varex stood silent, his organic eye fixed on the display while his cybernetic eye ran calculations. Around them, the raiders waited with growing tension. Finally, Varex spoke. The council would never accept such an arrangement. They see us as criminals and terrorists. Kate smiled for the first time since arriving on the ship. Varex, the council is terrified of you. Right now, they're mobilizing every fleet they have because they think you're going to destroy their colonies. If you walked into that chamber tomorrow and offered to protect those same colonies in exchange for environmental remediation, they'd fall over themselves to say yes. And you believe this could work? I believe it's the only thing that will work, Kate replied. You can spend the next decade fighting a war you can't win, watching your people die while you make the problem worse. Or you can spend that same decade building something that gives them hope for the future. Varex looked around the shuttle bay, taking in the weapons, the battle damage, and the faces of his followers. These were people who had lost everything and turned to violence because they saw no other option. If I were to consider such a proposal, he said carefully, what assurances would I have that the council would honor their agreements? Kate's smile widened. Varix, you'd have the best assurance possible. You'd have me. You? I'll personally guarantee the Council's compliance with any environmental remediation agreement. If they break their word, I'll resign from the diplomatic corps and join your fleet myself. The offer was so unexpected that even the hardened raiders around them looked surprised. Varix stared at Kate as if seeing her for the first time. You would sacrifice your career for people you barely know? Kate's expression grew serious. Varix, I've spent my entire life trying to prevent tragedies like what happened to Mira. If I can help turn the most feared raider fleet in the galaxy into a force for environmental protection, that's not a sacrifice. That's the greatest victory I could ever achieve. The ancient ethereal known as Whisper of Stars floated in the observation chamber high above the council floor, her translucent form shimmering with patterns of light that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy. Below her, the emergency session continued as delegates debated the news that Kate Sullivan had successfully negotiated with the Crimson Fleet. Beside her, Ambassador Ryan Brooks stood at the viewing window, studying the reactions of various species to the unprecedented diplomatic breakthrough. The youngest human on the council staff, Ryan had been chosen for this meeting specifically because of his ability to read the complex political undercurrents that most diplomats missed. The Zephyrians are pleased but nervous, Ryan observed quietly. They see the practical benefits of turning raiders into protectors, but they're worried about the precedent it sets. The Vorthan are running probability calculations, trying to determine if this solution is sustainable long-term. Whisper of Stars pulsed with amused light patterns. And what do you see in the others, young human? Ryan's eyes moved across the chamber below, cataloging micro-expressions and body language with unconscious precision. The Bruthari are conflicted. General Korg respects the tactical brilliance of converting enemies into allies, but his warrior culture sees negotiating with raiders as fundamentally wrong. The Nexari are calculating how much this will cost them in environmental remediation, and they're not happy about it. You read them as easily as children's picture books, Whisper of Stars noted. Tell me, young Ryan, do you understand why your species has this gift? Ryan turned from the window to look at the ancient being. Dr. Foster explained some of it. We evolved as social creatures who needed to understand complex interpersonal dynamics for survival. Dr. Foster understands the mechanics, Whisper of Stars replied, her light patterns shifting to deeper hues. But she does not grasp the full significance. Allow me to share what my people have observed over the millennia. The ethereal drifted closer to the window, her form casting prismatic patterns across the chamber. Every species that has achieved interstellar travel did so by developing a single dominant advantage. The Zephyrians became master engineers and builders. The Vorthan achieved perfect logical analysis. The Bruthari mastered warfare and strategy. Each focused on one aspect of survival and developed it to extraordinary levels. Ryan nodded, following the explanation. Specialization made them successful. Indeed. But humans are different. Your species never specialized in any single survival strategy. Whisper of Stars gestured toward the council floor, where human representatives moved between different delegations with ease. Watch how your people interact with each species. Below, Ryan could see Jake Morrison engaged in animated conversation with a group of Klaxon delegates, his gestures and postures subtly mirroring their movements. At another table, Lisa Carter was listening intently to a Lumen Harmony singer, her expression showing genuine appreciation for concepts that most species found incomprehensible. We adapt to whoever we're talking to, Ryan realized. It's not conscious, we just automatically adjust our communication style to match theirs. More than communication, Whisper of Stars corrected. You adjust your entire cognitive approach. When speaking with Zephyrians, humans think like engineers. When dealing with Vorthan, they think like mathematicians. When facing Bruthari, they think like warriors. Your species has the unprecedented ability to temporarily adopt the mental framework of almost any other sapient being. Ryan felt a chill as the implications became clear. That's why we're so effective at negotiation. We're not just understanding what other species want, we're actually thinking the way they think. Precisely. And that is also why other species find humans so disturbing. Whisper of Stars pulsed with patterns that conveyed ancient wisdom. Every other race meets humans and recognizes something familiar in your behavior, but they cannot quite identify what it is. It creates a sense of uncanny recognition that makes many species deeply uncomfortable. On the chamber floor below, Ryan watched as the debate continued. He could see the subtle ways that human delegates influenced the discussion, not through force or logic alone, but by somehow making each species feel understood and valued. It's like psychological shape-shifting, Ryan murmured. An apt description. Your species evolved on a world where you were neither the strongest predator nor the most successful prey. You survived by being able to understand and predict the behavior of every other creature in your environment. Over millions of years, this created minds capable of modeling almost any form of intelligence. Ryan turned back to Whisper of Stars. But that doesn't explain why we're allowed into the council chambers without weapons. Understanding others doesn't make us dangerous. The ethereal light patterns shifted to what Ryan recognized as gentle amusement. Young human, you still do not fully comprehend what your species has become. Let me show you something. The observation chamber's walls suddenly displayed recordings from across the galaxy. Ryan saw human diplomats, traders, scientists, and explorers in dozens of different contexts, always somehow managing to achieve outcomes that seemed impossible to other species. In the Altair system, human mediator Sarah Walsh ended a three-way war by convincing each faction that their enemies' demands were actually reasonable. One recording showed a small human woman sitting between representatives of three species that had been killing each other for decades. In the Proxima trade negotiations, human economist Tom Bradley restructured the entire galactic commodity market by making competitors realize they could profit more through cooperation than conflict. Another display showed complex economic models that had somehow satisfied the competing interests of 17 different trading empires. On the colony world New Eden, human administrator Linda Hayes prevented a genocide by helping two species understand that their religious differences were based on translation errors that had persisted for centuries. A third recording showed massive crowds of aliens who had been ready to slaughter each other instead working together to build shared temples. Ryan watched in growing amazement as example after example filled the displays. We're not just understanding other species. We're reprogramming them. You are helping them understand themselves better than they understood themselves, Whisper of Stars corrected. Humans see through the surface conflicts to the underlying needs and fears that drive behavior. Then you find ways to address those needs without requiring anyone to abandon their core identity. But that's still not an explanation for why we're considered dangerous enough to need the weapon exemption. Whisper of Stars' light patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating the approach of profound truth. Ryan, what is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy? Ryan thought for a moment. The Nexari planet crackers? The Bruthari dreadnoughts? The Vorthan reality disruptors? All of those can destroy matter, energy, even space-time itself, the ethereal agreed. But they cannot destroy an idea. They cannot change how someone thinks about themselves and their place in the universe. The most powerful weapon in existence is the ability to change minds permanently. The realization hit Ryan like a physical blow. You're saying we can reprogram entire civilizations? Not reprogram. Liberate. Humans help other species see past the artificial limitations they have placed on themselves. You show them that their conflicts are often based on misunderstandings, that their enemies might become allies, that their fundamental assumptions about reality might be incomplete. Whisper of Stars gestured toward the council chamber below. Every species down there came to this station armed with weapons designed to destroy their enemies. But humans came armed with something far more dangerous, the ability to convince their enemies to stop being enemies. Ryan felt the weight of this revelation settling over him. That's why other species are afraid of us. Not because we might kill them, but because we might change them. Yes. And change, for most species, is the most terrifying thing imaginable. They have spent thousands of years developing their cultures, their identities, their ways of understanding the universe. The idea that a species of psychological shapeshifters could come along and convince them to fundamentally alter those perspectives is more frightening than any physical threat. The ancient ethereal's form brightened with what might have been approval. But here is what makes humans truly remarkable, young Ryan. You do not use this power to dominate or control other species. You use it to help them become the best versions of themselves. Ryan looked down at the council chamber, where the debate about the Crimson Fleet had evolved into a broader discussion about environmental protection throughout the galaxy. Species that had never agreed on anything were finding common ground, building towards solutions that addressed everyone's concerns. Kate didn't just stop a war, he said slowly. She turned raiders into environmental protectors, and now she's got the entire council thinking about how to prevent future environmental disasters. And she did it without firing a shot, without threatening anyone, without forcing any species to act against their nature, Whisper of Stars observed. She simply helped them see that protecting the environment served their own interests better than ignoring it. Ryan shook his head in wonder. No wonder they made the exemption rule. We really are walking around with the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy. The most constructive weapons, Whisper of Stars corrected gently. Physical weapons destroy. Human empathy and understanding create. They build bridges, forge alliances, and solve problems that force cannot touch. Below them, the council session was moving toward a historic agreement on galactic environmental standards, with the former Crimson Fleet volunteering to serve as the enforcement mechanism. Ryan watched human delegates moving through the chamber, facilitating discussions, translating between incompatible worldviews, and somehow making natural enemies see each other as potential partners. We're not just diplomats, Ryan realized. We're reality hackers. We hack into other species' perceptions of reality and help them see new possibilities. Whisper of Stars pulsed with ancient wisdom. And that, young human, is why your species will either save this galaxy or terrify it into destroying itself. The power to change minds is the power to change everything. The celebration following the Crimson Fleet agreement lasted exactly 14 hours before the new crisis began. Warning klaxons echoed through Harmony Prime as massive ships materialized at the edge of the system, their hulls black as the void between stars and their designs unlike anything in the Council databases. Maria Santos was reviewing environmental protection protocols when the emergency alert reached her office. As the Council's chief negotiation specialist, she had been preparing for the routine work of implementing the new galactic environmental standards. Instead, she found herself staring at tactical displays showing the largest fleet anyone had ever seen. 2,000 ships, reported Admiral Rex, his scaled features grim as he addressed the emergency session. Each one the size of a battle cruiser, but our sensors can barely penetrate their hulls. We've never seen technology like this. Beside Maria, cultural analyst Alex Turner studied the little information they had gathered about the newcomers. They're calling themselves the Void Seekers. No previous contact with galactic civilization. They appeared simultaneously at 17 different strategic points throughout Council space. Elder Counselor Thek leaned forward from his massive chair. What do they want? The answer came immediately as the main view screen activated, showing a being that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The figure's features were hidden beneath layers of dark energy fields, making it impossible to determine their species or even their basic physical structure. Beings of this corrupted galaxy, the figure spoke, its voice carrying the sound of dying stars. I am Prime Void Caller Nexus, speaker for the Pure Collective. We have observed your so-called council for 1,000 years, watching as you spread contamination across the stars. The chamber fell silent. Even the most warlike species seemed stunned by the sheer presence radiating from the view screen. You intermingle your species, blend your cultures, and corrupt the pure essence of what each race was meant to be, Nexus continued. This abomination ends now. All species will return to their home systems immediately. Any attempt to maintain contact between species will result in complete sterilization. General Korg was the first to find his voice. You dare threaten the Council? We represent 47 species across thousands of worlds. Numbers are irrelevant, Nexus replied. We have watched civilizations rise and fall while maintaining our purity in the void between galaxies. Your weapons cannot harm us, your alliances cannot protect you, and your diplomacy is meaningless to those who have transcended such base corruptions. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Admiral Chen was the first to speak. Our preliminary sensor sweeps suggest their claims about advanced technology are not empty boasts. Their energy signatures are unlike anything we've encountered. They're isolationists, Alex observed, studying the data on his tablet. They've been out there in the void for 1,000 years, refusing all contact with galactic civilization. But something has changed. Something has driven them to break their isolation and actively threaten us. Maria stood up from her seat, drawing the attention of the chamber. We need to understand what happened 1,000 years ago. Why did they leave? What are they really afraid of? Commander Vex consulted his historical database. 1,000 years ago was the founding of the first interspecies alliance. The Zephyrian-Vorthan Trade Compact that eventually evolved into the modern council. They didn't leave because they hated other species, Maria realized. They left because they were afraid of losing themselves in the process of integration. Elder Counselor Thek nodded slowly. Fear of cultural assimilation. Many species have struggled with this concern. But they've been watching us for 1,000 years, Alex added. Something about recent events must have convinced them that their fears were justified. Something that made them decide active intervention was necessary. Maria felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together in her mind. Alex, pull up the records from the last 6 months. Major diplomatic breakthroughs, cultural exchanges, anything that might have appeared threatening to extreme isolationists. The data flowed across the chamber's displays, the Crimson Fleet integration, the new environmental accords, the establishment of joint research facilities, and dozens of smaller agreements that had brought previously separate species into closer cooperation. We've been more successful lately than ever before, Maria observed. More species working together, more cultural barriers breaking down, more examples of former enemies becoming allies. From their perspective, that's not success, Alex said grimly. That's proof that their worst fears are coming true. They're seeing species lose their distinct identities and become something new. Admiral Rex studied the tactical displays showing the Void Seeker fleet positions. Even if we understood their motivations, the military reality is unchanged. They have superior numbers and technology. Direct confrontation would be catastrophic. Then we don't confront them directly, Maria said. We find a way to reach them that doesn't threaten their core identity. General Korg snorted in derision. Reach them. They just threaten to sterilize our worlds if we don't abandon everything we've built. These are not beings interested in negotiation. Maria turned to face the Bruthari general. With respect, General, that's exactly what everyone said about the Crimson Fleet. And about your own people, for that matter, before humans started working with the Council. The situations are not comparable, Korg protested. The Crimson Fleet was driven by desperation. These Void Seekers seem driven by ideology. Ideology based on fear, Alex corrected. Fear that contact with other species will destroy what makes them unique. It's not that different from what drives any isolationist movement. Maria walked to the center of the chamber, her mind racing through possibilities. We need to find a way to communicate with them that proves interaction doesn't have to mean assimilation. We need to show them that species can work together while maintaining their distinct identities. And how exactly do you propose to prove that to beings who have spent 1,000 years in self-imposed exile? Commander Vex asked. By demonstrating it, Maria replied. By showing them that the Council isn't about creating some homogenized galactic culture, but about helping each species become the best version of themselves. Elder Counselor Thek leaned back in his chair, his ancient eyes thoughtful. You propose to meet with them as the human Sullivan met with the Raiders? More than that, Maria said. I propose to meet with them accompanied by representatives from multiple species. We show them that diversity strengthens rather than weakens us. The chamber erupted in voices as delegates began arguing among themselves. The idea of sending a multi-species delegation to meet with beings who viewed any interspecies contact as contamination seemed like madness to most of the council. Above the noise, Alex's voice carried clearly. It could work. If we can prove that working together makes each species more themselves rather than less, we might be able to convince them that the council serves their interests too. Admiral Chen shook her head. The risk is enormous. If they interpret a multi-species delegation as confirmation of their worst fears, they might attack immediately. They're going to attack anyway if we don't find a solution, Maria pointed out. They've given us an ultimatum with no room for negotiation. Our only option is to change the fundamental terms of the conversation. Commander Vex studied the tactical displays again. Even if you could reach them diplomatically, their fleet positions suggest they're prepared for immediate action. They won't give you much time to make your case. Maria smiled grimly. Then we better make sure our case is compelling from the very first word. She turned to address the full chamber. I need volunteers. Species that can demonstrate how cooperation has made them stronger while preserving their unique qualities. We're going to show the Void Seekers that the Council isn't about destroying diversity, it's about celebrating it. To her surprise, the first volunteer was General Korg himself. The massive brute Hari stood slowly, his expression serious. The humans helped my people understand that true strength comes not from isolation but from choosing when and how to fight. If these Void Seekers can be shown the same truth, perhaps we can avoid a war that would devastate the galaxy. One by one, other delegates began volunteering. Commander Vex of the Zephyrians, Harmony Singer Yull of the Lumen, Engineer Clix of the Nexari, and even young Zix, 9 of the Klaxons stepped forward. Elder Counselor Thek watched the unprecedented display of unity with something approaching wonder. In all my years serving this council, I have never seen such willingness to risk everything for the chance of peace. Maria looked around at the volunteers, representatives of species that had been enemies just decades earlier, now ready to face the unknown together. Alex, how long do we have before their ultimatum expires? Alex consulted his chronometer. 18 hours. Then we have 18 hours to convince the most isolated beings in the galaxy that diversity is strength, not weakness. Maria's expression was determined but realistic. And if we fail, we'll have the privilege of being the last diplomatic mission in galactic history. The weight of that possibility settled over the chamber like a shroud. But among the fear and uncertainty, there was also something else, hope. Hope that once again, the power of understanding might prove stronger than the force of weapons. Hope that humans and their allies could find a way to turn even the most implacable enemies into friends. The diplomatic shuttle approached the Void Seeker flagship through space that seemed to absorb light itself. The massive vessel ahead of them defied easy description, its hull shifting between states of matter like a solid shadow that occasionally flickered with glimpses of impossible geometries. Inside the shuttle, Maria Santos sat with the most unlikely diplomatic team ever assembled. General Korg adjusted his ceremonial armor, which had been modified to include symbols from the 7 worlds the brute Hari now protected. Commander Vex ran final checks on his translation equipment, designed to handle languages that might not follow conventional linguistic patterns. Harmony Singer Yull meditated quietly, her luminous aura dimmed to prevent interference with the ship's systems. Sensors show no conventional docking bays, reported their pilot, Lieutenant Davis. They're sending guidance signals, but the destination appears to be inside the ship's hull somehow. Alex Turner looked up from his data tablets, where he had been reviewing everything known about isolation psychology. Don't think of it as a ship in the traditional sense. Think of it as a space that exists partially outside normal reality. They've spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of separation from everything else. The shuttle passed through what felt like several layers of reality before settling into a chamber that seemed larger inside than the entire ship they had seen from outside. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and the gravity felt somehow wrong, as if it was being generated by principles that had nothing to do with mass or rotation. As they disembarked, figures emerged from the shadows. The Void Seekers were humanoid in basic shape but seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially elsewhere. Their features shifted constantly, never quite settling into forms that outside eyes could fully comprehend. Prime Void Caller Nexus materialized before them, his presence radiating the cold between stars. You come as representatives of the contamination, he said, his voice echoing from directions that didn't exist. You prove our point by your very presence here. Maria stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the ultimate test of everything humans had learned about diplomacy and understanding. Prime Void Caller, we come as representatives of something you've never seen before. We come as proof that unity doesn't require uniformity. Impossible, Nexus replied. Interaction leads to corruption. Contact leads to loss of self. We have observed this truth for millennia. General Korg surprised everyone by speaking next. Honored Void Caller, before I met humans, I believed the same thing. The Bruthari were warriors, pure and simple. Contact with other species could only weaken us by introducing foreign concepts that had no place in our culture. The massive general gestured to his modified armor. These symbols represent the worlds my people now protect. Each one is different, each one has taught us something new about strength and honor. We have not become less Bruthari. We have become more Bruthari than we ever thought possible. Nexus's form flickered with what might have been interest. You claim that contamination has strengthened you. Commander Vex stepped forward, his optical sensors focusing on the Void Seeker leader. Prime Void Caller, the Zephyrians are engineers. For thousands of years, we built in isolation, creating marvels that served only our own needs. When we joined the Council, many feared we would lose our engineering identity. He activated a holographic display showing complex technical schematics. Instead, we discovered that the greatest engineering challenges come from solving problems for multiple species simultaneously. Building a space station that can support 47 different forms of life? That's engineering at a level we never could have imagined in isolation. These are words, Nexus said dismissively. You speak of benefits, but you cannot deny the loss of purity. Harmony's singer Yul's aura brightened slightly as she joined the conversation. Respected Void Caller, the Lumen exists to maintain harmony in the universe. For generations, we believed this meant avoiding all discord, all conflict, all difference. Her voice carried harmonic undertones that seemed to resonate even in the strange physics of the Void Seeker ship. Working with other species taught us that true harmony doesn't come from eliminating differences. It comes from helping different voices find ways to sing together without losing their individual songs. Alex stepped forward with his data tablet. Prime Void Caller, may I share something with you? We've analyzed the development patterns of every known spacefaring civilization. Without exception, species that achieve their greatest potential do so through controlled contact with others. The display showed evolutionary charts, technological development curves, and cultural complexity indices. Isolation doesn't preserve purity. It creates stagnation. The species that maintain their core identities while growing through interaction consistently outperform those that choose absolute isolation. Nexus studied the data with intense focus. Your analysis assumes that growth and change are desirable. We have achieved perfection in our separation. Why would we risk that for uncertain benefits? Maria recognized the opening she had been waiting for. Because you haven't achieved perfection, Prime Void Caller. You've achieved fear. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Other Void Seekers materialized around them, their forms radiating dangerous energy. Maria continued calmly. If you had truly achieved perfect separation, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have spent 1,000 years watching us. You wouldn't have felt threatened enough to break your isolation and demand that we change our behavior. Explain, Nexus commanded. You're afraid that what we're doing is appealing. You're afraid that if you really understood what we've accomplished, you might want to join us. So instead of risking that contamination, you'd rather destroy us all. Alex supported her analysis with more data. The timing of your intervention isn't random. You acted now because our recent successes have been unprecedented. The Crimson Fleet integration, the environmental accords, the cultural exchange programs. We're proving that interaction can strengthen rather than